I'm Amy. Welcome to the kitchen at the Blue OK. Today I want to show you how to make a raw chocolate torte. And this recipe is one that you can build on. I like to start with a great crust and this raw chocolate ganache. It's a creamy chocolate layer that you could then put other layers of dessert on top of. But I'm going to start with the basic torte and then we'll go from there. So for the crust, I'm using dehydrated almonds, which means I've soaked these almonds overnight and dehydrated them in my dehydrator for about 8 hours, so they're actually crunchy, and it actually makes the crust less oily when you blend it in your food processor, so you're going to get more of a flour from the almonds rather than an oily nut crust. So dehydrated almonds. I'm also using coconut sugar or coconut crystals today. It's a product from the coconut plant. It's actually not from the coconut itself, it's from the sap from the coconut tree, from the blossoms themselves, and it's dried into a crystal. So it's a completely raw sugar, a completely raw coconut crystal from this sap. It's very hard to find raw sugar, and this is a raw sweetener that I really, really like. So that's going to be in the crust, some raw cacao powder, a little bit of coconut flour. Again, it's this company, Coconut Secret, makes an excellent raw coconut flour, just dehydrated coconut ground into flour. I'm using a little bit of ground vanilla bean and a pinch of sea salt and a little bit of coconut oil or coconut butter. So we're going to put this right into the food processor and start to mix these together into our crust. In go the almonds, and I'm going to put the almonds in first and just get those ground into a little bit of a flour first. You might need to pulse your machine a couple times to really get it broken up well, so pulse and then grind. Now you should be able to see that this is turning into a fine flour. If you had the almonds and they weren't dehydrated, sometimes they'll turn into an almond paste before they get this finely ground. So it's really nice to use the dehydrated almonds for that. So now we're going to go ahead and start to add the rest of the ingredients. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the coconut crystals, the raw cacao powder. I'm going to get this coconut flour mixed in, a little bit of the salt and vanilla. And the last thing I'm going to add slowly is the coconut oil. So first I'm going to start with these. One more round of pulsing. So now you'll see the mixture is starting to look like an even finer flour. You have the chocolate powder mixed in there, the coconut flour, and to make it stick together in the bottom of our springform pan, we're going to start to add the coconut butter or the coconut oil and get it mixed in there. So just a couple more rounds of pulsing, and this is going to turn a dark brown color. It look like an Oreo cookie crust almost, a really rich chocolate crust. Okay, so now you'll see it's gone from that flour consistency to something that we will be able to press into the bottom of the pan. So what you're going to do is just scoop it out of the food processor and begin pressing it into our springform cheesecake pan here. So what you want to do is actually sort of spread it evenly around the pan, and then we'll press it together. So you don't want one area to be thick and the other area thin. You want to get a uniform coating on the bottom of the pan, and then we'll press it together. And a springform pan, if you don't know what that is, they're commonly used to make cheesecakes, and it just means that you'll be able to undo the outside of the pan so it will peel away from the rest of the dessert, but it will hold it in place until it hardens in the refrigerator. Then it will stand on its own at the end. So we're pressing it into the springform pan, and I just use the back of my hands. You always want to work with clean hands in the kitchen, but especially with raw foods, because you'll do a lot of pressing and kneading things by hand. So getting that pressed evenly around the edges. And it's kind of up to you. You can have it go up on the sides a little if you want, or you can just leave it right flat along the bottom. This is a delicious crust. Sometimes I save the rest and just dehydrate it into cookies if I have a little bit extra. Once you get it pressed in there, look for any thin spots that might not be as well covered with crust. And then from there, we're going to make the ganache to put on top. So right here are the ingredients for the torte. It's going to be a lot of raw chocolate in this particular dessert. So we have more cacao powder, a little bit of agave nectar, and I'm also using the coconut syrup, that is the dried coconut sap. So I've blended those two sweeteners together, and then we're using coconut oil, a little bit of cacao butter, and some vanilla extract. And this makes an incredible raw chocolate dessert. It's very rich, very decadent. It's for chocolate lovers. So if you love chocolate, you will love this recipe. It's just fantastic. Coconut oil goes right into the blender with a little bit of cacao butter. And the thing I like to do next is add the chocolate, and I actually add the sweetener last because it really begins to thicken up quickly as soon as you blend it. So we're going to start with these two ingredients in the blender and the vanilla, and then slowly add the syrup through the top. So you're going to start to blend on low. Just get that chocolate and coconut oil mixing in the blender. And you can see it starting to turn very chocolatey. And then slowly we're going to add the sweetener. Sometimes you'll hear your blender working to pull the agave or the coconut syrup down into the blades, but it just means that it's getting thick in there, which is the consistency that you want. It's going to stay soft enough to cut, but it's going to firm up hard enough to form a slice. And I like the flavor. It's right on spot. So I'm going to go ahead and pour this right on top of my crust. And let me move it here so you can get a better look at it. You just want to pour it evenly around the edges and then start to fill in the center. And as I said, this is the first layer of a torte. You could leave it just as is, or you could also start to add layers on top. But you'll be able to sort of spread this evenly through the pan. And this just gets refrigerated, and it sets up in the refrigerator with this delicious crust and a layer of raw chocolate right on top. You can serve it with our coconut whipped cream topping. Could also serve it with a raw ice cream or just as is. It's great with fresh fruit. And you will most likely need a spatula to get it all out of the blender. Once you do, you're just going to make sure it's evenly spread through the pan so that when you refrigerate it, you get even slices. And sometimes you'll get a little bit of powder that's stuck to the edge of to the side of the blender, and that's fine. It's actually, the mixture is so rich that blending can be tricky. You want to always add the coconut oil and chocolate first, because if you add the sweetener too soon, it starts to thicken up on you before the powder is all the way combined. So sometimes I'll even give it just a little bit of a jiggle to even it up. And then I'm going to put this right into the refrigerator. It should start setting up in the next hour to 2 hours. You should be able to slice through it. And depending on how cold your refrigerator is, it could take up to 3 to 4 hours, but then you'll just take the spring form right off of it and be able to slice it into pieces. So this is the first step of the raw chocolate torte. There'll be other recipes where we'll show other fillings that you can put on top of it, but I'm going to go ahead and pop this right into the refrigerator. I made another one earlier that I'm going to pull out of the refrigerator just to show you what it looks like sliced and the different things you can do with it. Welcome back. I just took the torte out of the refrigerator, and I want to show you how to pop it out of the springform pan and slice it up and put it onto a plate. So you'll have refrigerated the torte. It's hopefully set up, and what you're going to do is unlock your springform pan if it's one that opens like this, and sometimes you'll get a little bit of the mixture sticking to the outside of the pan, so you'll just cut that away with a knife, and then it should come the rest of the way off. Now sometimes, as I was telling you before, I will put a layer of mousse on top of this. We have a raw chocolate mousse recipe online that you could look up. You could pour that mousse right on top and set it up again, or you could use our raw whipped cream and put that on top to decorate the cake. But or the torte, I actually like this recipe just as is. I often just slice it, put it on a plate with some fresh fruit and a little bit of coconut flour. It looks like powdered sugar, and it's a wonderful decoration. And it's so rich just by itself, it gives you plenty of chocolate, and it's a full dessert. So I'm going to show you how I serve it, which is just to cut a fairly thin slice. I actually don't even serve too big of slices of this because, as I mentioned, it's so rich. And then just slide right underneath it, and hopefully the whole slice will lift right out. The first slice is always the hardest to get out. Once you do, you'll lay that right on your plate. And then sometimes I use raspberries, sometimes I'll use a caramel sauce. We have some fresh raspberries in season today, so I'm just going to put a couple of those right there, and a little bit of the coconut flour just to dust the plate with. And you can usually put it right through a strainer and just give it a little dusting over the berries, over the chocolate, and even a little bit right down onto the plate, and you'll have a beautiful slice of raw chocolate torte. I can never make this torte without tasting it, so I'm going to have to make sure that this tastes all right. How can you pass up chocolate? Always delicious. Can't go wrong with this recipe. Sometimes I also like to make this in a smaller version. This one is made in a miniature springform pan, more of something you might share with one other person or just sort of have slices of throughout the day or the week. I hope you experiment with this recipe, and like I said, you can use it, you can build it by putting a mousse on top or layers in between, or you can serve it just as is, and it's a delicious raw chocolate torte. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them right here on the website, and remember, the eating gorilla always comes in peace.